NASA did quite well with, demonstrating that even an administrator has psychic ability. So they gave me
an astonishing discovery that still hasn't been fully understood.
That's right. So they gave us a little money. They gave us $80,000 to investigate whether people could learn to get in touch with the part of themselves that's psychic, and that was a successful experiment. And together with similar money from the CIA that started the program at SRI, Hal Puthoff and I started that in 1972.
Two very catalytic minds. I know Hal also, of course, and he's a dear friend and a wonderful, wonderful guy.
We're like twins born together and reared apart. You may not know. Hal and I are both laser physicists, as you know.
Yeah, he said something like that to me about you once.
And we're both born in Chicago. We're only children. And for some mysterious reason, our first job after leaving graduate school was with the Sperry Gyroscope Company. And I was working for Sperry in New York, and he was working for Sperry in Florida. But we're working on the same project, even though we never met.
Now, do you think you may have made a pact between the lives, or do you believe in reincarnation at all?
Oh, I think the evidence that some aspect of us survives, the evidence for that is very good.
It is very good, yeah. So perhaps you and Hal intended this.
Well, we then met in 72, where he gave a lecture at Stanford that I attended, and it sounded to me very much like the kinds of lectures that I gave on the same subject. So we became friends at that point, and the program came out of that. But we had followed a similar trajectory, but had not met until 72. Even though we were both laser scientists and interested in psychic stuff.
Which is kind of, it's an unusual but sort of understandable combination in a funny way, because they're both about the kind of leading edge of signaling in a strange way, one of them in the physical world and one of them in this other part of the world. Do you think that psychic things are a part of the natural world and physical, or what does the supernatural mean to you?
Well, the physics chauvinist, that is, physicist, thinks that anything can be explained. I think that with the increasing currency of the idea of non-locality, that we have a quite good handle on how psychic ability works. The idea of non-locality says that in the universe, things that appear to be separate from one another are actually connected. Now, the experiments that have been done in the physics laboratory all pertain to elementary particles going off in opposite directions. But the fact that we see this kind of entanglement, and the idea of entangled photons and entangled states over kilometer distances gives us a place to begin to describe psychic ability.
This is Whitley Strieber, and it's using my psychic ability, I can assure you, we're going to be back in just a couple of minutes with more Dreamland. Russel Targ, a legend in our time, Limitless Mind, his most focused, most empowering book ever. Don't miss it. Get it from the unknowncountry.com store. This is one of those books that you really need, you can actually use in the most practical possible way to take yourself beyond where you are now. Russel Targ, Limitless Mind. It's quite real. Get it from the unknowncountry.com store. This is Whitley Strieber, and I was right, psychically. We are back. This is Dreamland, and we're talking to Russel Targ. I'm not afraid to call him a legend in our time. Russel, why don't you tell us your website address, if you will?
I have an easy website address. I'm at espresearch.com.
Finally, somebody who managed to actually get a .com that was relevant to what they do. You must have gotten that back in the dark ages.
Yeah, they saved that for me. I got that a few years ago. And on the website, I describe books that I'm writing and publishing and remote viewing workshops that I carry out here and there.
And we are talking in sort of general terms about Russel Targ and the work of Russel Targ and Limitless Mind, a guide to remote viewing and transformation of consciousness. And Russell, I want to get into one of the most arresting parts of the book is why remote viewing is actually a spiritual experience and what it has to do with transformation of consciousness.
In remote viewing, it's necessary to quiet your mind and give up the idea of guessing and analysis when you try and describe a distant place. What you find yourself doing in a remote viewing experiment or in learning to do remote viewing at home, somebody will have an object for you which they've hidden away and say, I've got an object, tell me about it. And you then want to quiet your mind and give up naming or guessing or all your attachments. This is what Ingo Swann says, you have to give up analytical overlay and just describe the pure images that come to your mind. And those images, magically, will pertain to what you're about to see. Now, we don't know whether it pertains to the object as it's hidden away or whether it pertains to the object that will be put in your hand in a few minutes, because we know that you have the ability to look into the distance as well as into the future. But this mental process that we invite you to do, that is the key to learning remote viewing, is just what the Buddhists call giving up conditioned awareness. Our conditioned awareness is the awareness we have that's overcome with all the suffering and betrayals and things that we've learned in the course of our lives that cause us to give meaning to what we experience. So conditioned awareness is where we live our lives in guilt over the past and anxiety over the future and never get to experience the present. We want to give up that conditioning or be aware of it, reside in the present, quiet our mind, give up naming, and then on the remote viewing scene, you are able to describe and experience the object with regard to your awareness as you move from this conditioned awareness, which is where we normally reside, into naked awareness. You then have the experience of spaciousness. Your awareness moves out into the non-local realms, which is where the information is. So although it would be silly to say remote viewing is a spiritual path, I'm definitely not saying that. But the mental process of quieting your mind to do remote viewing is very much like what the Dzogchen Buddhists teach you to do as a path toward experiencing the spaciousness and timeless awareness. So that, as I was studying Dzogchen Buddhism, which is this path of pristine clarity that came out of the third turning of the Buddhist wheel, I was struck by the great similarities between what the Buddhist masters had to say in the 8th century, the great similarities between what they said and what we tell people every day in a remote viewing workshop. The vocabulary was strikingly similar about giving up naming and guessing and the mental noise in a desire to experience the spaciousness. So, in fact,
Russell, you used two little words there that are actually huge: giving up. Let's talk a little bit more about that process of that giving up and where it comes from and where it leads. Because it's very important to my listeners and to me to understand exactly what you mean. When you give up, Russell, what do you do?
It's a recognition. It's a Vedic teaching. I mean, this is all very old stuff.
Very old, yes,
this
I
is
know.
not new age. The Vedic teaching is that you already have within you whatever it is you're looking for. That we're all looking to experience love. And what we discover when we finally give up the chatter is that we have the capacity for that love and the experience of love and the divine within us. Now, this is what the Thomas Gospel that was really illuminated by Elaine Teagles. But Jesus describes that the kingdom of God is within you. The kingdom of God is who you are, that you don't need an intermediary, and it's in opposition to the dualistic view. Most Judeo-Christian religions say God is huge and he's out there, and you're puny and you're out here, and you have to somehow reach from where you are way up to where he is. It's a very dualistic view. The Buddhists are a non-dual point of view, and they say you have within you, there's no separation between you and the divine. You have within you what you're looking for. The divine is available. The spaciousness is available. And what you have to do is call off the search. What you have is right at hand, because the separation is an illusion. The whole thing is a very non-dual, non-local point of view.
So you have to call off the search.
It's the idea that in the remote, there was a very interesting book written by the historical figure who brought Buddhism to Tibet, the guru Padmasambhava. In the 8th century, he wrote a book which you can still buy. And of course, every author loves to see a book that's in print for 1,200 years. It's very inspiring for a writer. But his book is called Self-Realization Through Seeing with Naked Awareness. That is to say, when you give up the searching and the naming and the guessing and move from conditioned awareness to naked awareness and this timeless experience, you then simultaneously take steps in the direction of self-realization. So in a way, and I discovered this book just as I was finishing up my book, Limitless Mind, and was really amazed that the two books are quite similar. My book is A Guide to Remote Viewing and Transformation of Consciousness.
Right.
And this other man's book, 1,200 years before, was Self-Realization and Seeing with Naked Awareness, which is very, very similar in title and concept to what I was writing about. And his view of experiencing naked awareness is just what Ingo Swann has taught us as the guidelines to learn to do remote viewing. So in my book, Limitless Mind, I really spell out just what we did at the Stanford Research Institute program, teaching Army intelligence people how to get in touch with the part of themselves that's psychic to do remote viewing.
And it's a book that I've read many times, and in fact, when I was doing the author tour for Communion, which was a daunting and difficult experience, I read that book constantly the whole time on the planes and in the hotel. And one of the things that struck me about it and that has stayed with me is the description of the really, I guess it's the best word, is the ease of doing this. It's not really an effort in any sense that we think of effort. It's rather more of a giving up of effort. Does that make sense? Can you illuminate that at all, or is that sort of in another direction?
That's absolutely true. That's why the remote viewing in America was much more successful than it was in the Soviet Union. Because you can't make somebody be psychic. You can't punish them if they're not psychic. A person has to feel very safe and surrender into the experience. When we went to Russia in whenever it was, in the 1990s, we visited some of the famous Russian psychics. And during that period, what we told them is we worked with a famous Russian named Juna Davidashvili, who was a healer. And what my daughter and I told her is that we will take responsibility for the experiment. You just have to do what we tell you, describe your mental pictures, and our experience is that this will turn out all right. Don't worry about anything. if you just describe what you're experiencing, what I know.
Yeah, he said something like that to me about you once.
And we're both born in Chicago. We're only children. And for some mysterious reason, our first job after leaving graduate school was with the Sperry Gyroscope Company. And I was working for Sperry in New York, and he was working for Sperry in Florida. But we're working on the same project, even though we never met.
Now, do you think you may have made a pact between the lives? Or do you believe in reincarnation at all?
Oh, I think the evidence that some aspect of us survives.
Two very catalytic minds. I know Hal also, of course, and he's a dear friend and a wonderful, wonderful guy.
We're like twins born together and reared apart. You may not know. Hal and I are both laser physicists, as you know. NASA did quite well with, demonstrating that even a administrator has psychic ability. So they gave me
an astonishing discovery that still hasn't been fully understood.
That's right. So they gave us a little money. They gave us $80,000 to investigate whether people could learn to get in touch with the part of themselves that's psychic. And that was a successful experiment. And together with similar money from the CIA that started the program at SRI, Hal Puthoff and I started that in 1972.